When enrollment gets tight, most independent and alternative school founders do the same thing. They lower the price. I've tracked 4 years of retention data across hundreds of families and schools that I work with. In this video, I'm going to show you what that data looks like, why it happens, and what a 259 school study says you should do instead. Picture this. It's spring. Your enrollment target is 150 families and you're at 110. The board is asking questions, your head of school is stressed, and someone in the room says, what if we offer 30% off tuition for new families? It feels so logical. Lower the price, remove the barrier, more families say yes. Every school founder that I've talked to has had some version of this moment. I work with a school that actually ran this experiment. Within the Right Families Method program that you can see in the description, there's actually a school that I've been working with that actually ran this experiment. It was a year and there was some real desperation, enrollment was short, and revenue was tight, and they offer roughly 30% off tuition for new families. About 75 families enrolled that year at that discounted rate. Their first year retention, meaning how many came back the following year, was under 40%. At under 40% retention on 75 families, that's roughly 45 families gone, potentially over $1 million in lifetime revenue that just walked out of the door. And those families still cost money to acquire. The school spent to reach them, enroll them, onboard their children, and serve them for a year, and all of it is gone. The very next year, this school did not discount. The academic program got stronger instead. The head of school told me the culture was the best it had ever been. Students were doing works at levels the teacher hadn't seen before. They enrolled about 25 new families, far fewer than the discount year. However, close to 70% of them came back, nearly double the retention. For context, the National Association of Independent Schools average overall retention for independent schools is about 90%, which includes returning families who are much easier to keep. To be fair, a lot of these data, sometimes you don't really know how they measure it. You don't know the schools that they're working with. You know, it's not the same to have a school that only has 20 students and comparing their numbers to a school that has about 1,000. Having said that, all that I'm trying to communicate is that, you know, about 90%, 80%, even 70% retention might be acceptable depending on the school you have. The point for this school that I was working with, though, was that for first-year families specifically, that number, even though it's always lower at under 40%, isn't just below average. It's a crisis, and it happened the 1 year they lowered their price. If your school has ever offered discounts, formal tuition reductions, scholarships used as enrollment closers, or quiet deals made in the admissions office, go separate those families in your data. Compare their retention to families who paid full tuition. Most schools never do this. And if you don't even know whether your discounted family stayed or left, that's the first problem. And if you do know and they're gone, that number is worth calculating because the cost of replacing them is real. Now, this data tells us what happened, but it doesn't explain why. And the why is where the fix lives. There's a principle that I apply all the time within marketing. It's called the consistency bias. Once someone makes a purchase at a certain level, they continue making decisions consistent with that level. A family that pays full tuition is signaling, I believe this education is worth what it costs. A family that enrolls at a discount is signaling something different. I'll try at this price. And I've seen this play out. Again, I'm an executive at a school and I also consult for a selected number of schools. A school that I consult for actually had a family that enrolled at a discount rate. At re-enrollment, this family asked, can we get the same grade again? And when the answer was no, they just left. And it was not that the school got worse and it was not that their child was not learning, but the reason was that their decision was always anchored to the deal, and the deal expired. Now, there are all sorts of actions the school could have taken to actually save this family. For example, detach the value that they perceived that was mostly around tuition and actually show the value that they're getting out of what they're paying. But regardless of that, here we anchor to price and we were judged based on price. There's a reason the best admissions processes take time. You know, you might have a campus visit, classroom observations, conversations with teachers. Every one of those steps is the family investing more of themselves. By the time they write a tuition check, they've built something. They feel ownership of the decision. And people don't walk away from things they've built. A family that got fast-tracked because the discount closed them quickly, they skipped all of that. Their enrollment was a transaction, not a transformation. And transactions are very easy to undo. This is also why within-year retention tends to be strong at the schools that I work for. Usually, we at least have 80%. Sometimes we have up to 90%. And it is because families don't leave mid-year. This is also why within-year retention tends to be strong at the schools that I work with. The families don't just leave mid-year. They leave maybe in the summer when they have to actively choose to re-enroll. But at that point, that's the moment when the depth of their convictions get tested. My data shows that full-price families who went through the full process often have deep conviction. Discount families, on the other hand, those who were close on price, have shallow conviction. And when June arrives and they're deciding whether to write next year's check, shallow conviction cracks. Here's a signal you can check this week. Look at how your families pay. Not just how much, but how. Families who pay up front and on time tend to have the strongest retention, and families who negotiate a discount tend to have the weakest. The pattern is consistent enough that how a family enters often predicts how long they will stay. So by this point, you already know which families at your school have the deepest conviction. They show up, they refer, they re-enroll without being asked. Now ask yourself, how did those families enroll? My bet is that almost none of them came on a discount. By the way, if this is making you rethink how your school approaches pricing and enrollment, I put together something called the Right Families Method. There's a video in the description that walks through how I help school founders build enrollment systems that attract families with conviction, not just families with availability. Go check it out. And let's keep going. And let's keep going because I want to have some time to tell you what to do instead of discounting. Because if discounting doesn't work, what do you do when families say it's too expensive? Schools that discount are usually solving the right problem with the wrong tool. A study that I like to think about more because of its principles, because it's quite old, it's from 2017, but I like to keep it in mind because of the principles it shares. This is a study that tracked 259 independent schools over 6 years, and the finding was definitive. There is no statistical correlation between tuition price changes and enrollment demand. Whether a school raised tuition, held it flat, or cut it, enrollment didn't change. Price was not the variable that made that change. So what was it? It was perceived value. Families enrolled and stayed at schools where they could see specifically what their tuition was paying for. What does my child's day actually look like? What are they learning that they couldn't learn at the school down the road? What's different here than I can see with my own eyes? Remember the school that hit close to 70% retention without discounts? What changed wasn't the price, it was the product. Students were doing work at levels the teachers hadn't seen before. Parents, they could see their children being transformed. And that visible transformation is what made families stay. It was not a deal. The actual evidence that the education was working. It's been about 6 months since we actually got the retention to 70%. And at this point, we're actually seeing numbers closer to 85%. And again, no discounts have been ever done. In fact, we raised prices. The problem was never the price. The problem was that families couldn't see the value clearly enough from the outside. They heard alternative school and didn't know what to picture. They looked at the website and saw philosophy language instead of a child's day. That's not a pricing problem, that's a communication problem. And communication problems don't require you to give away a single dollar of tuition. When a family genuinely says, I cannot afford this, there's a principle I learned from a mentor of mine that changed how I think about it. You never lower the price and keep the offer the same. Because the moment you do that, you've told every family paying full tuition that the original price was inflated. Instead, you can adjust what's included. A different enrollment track, a core-only option without certain electives or extended programming. The price stays tied to the value. If someone gets less, they pay less. If they want everything, they pay for everything. The link between price and value stays intact, and that's what prospect trusts with every other family at your school. Stop asking, how do we make this more affordable? And start asking, how do we make the value more visible? Can a family looking at your school from the outside picture a Tuesday morning looks like? Can they hear from other parents what the transformation felt like? If the answer is no, that's where the work begins. So go ahead and pull your school's website, in your head even. If a parent lands on that page for the first time, can they see in 30 seconds what your schools cost, what it costs? And if they can't, that gap is costing you families. No discount will fix it. Here's the thing most founders miss. Discounting tuition feels like solving an enrollment problem. But what it actually does is create a retention problem. And retention problems are more expensive because they compound. Every family that leaves has to be replaced. And replacing a family costs way more than just keeping one. I built something for school founders who are seeing this pattern. It's called the Right Families Method. There's a video in the description that walks through the whole system, how it helps schools close the gap between what they actually deliver in the classroom and what families can see from the outside. So enrollment grows through conviction, not through discounts. If anything in this video made you think we've been solving a communication problem with a pricing solution, go watch that video. Link is in the description. And before you leave, I want to say that I put out videos like this every week. Real data, real stories from inside the work. If that's useful for you, subscribe. And drop a comment. Has your school ever offered a discount to close an enrollment? I want to know if the pattern I'm seeing that discount families leaving first is actually real.